Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is Friday the 14th of June 2019 and tonight's topic: crypto exchange Binance to block US accounts. Binance is, I believe, the world's largest cryptocurrency trading platform. And they announced today that they will be blocking US accounts come September. Now, for people who follow cryptocurrencies or financial news in passing, you might draw the conclusion that this means that the regulators are cracking down on cryptocurrencies. They're banning it. So Binance has to block U.S. customers because the U.S. is blocking Binance, and Binance has cryptocurrencies. Well, it's not really like that. What many people don't understand, and there's no reason why they would, that in the United States, we have securities laws, and they apply to companies that operate, and when they operate and they issue securities or share certificates or tokens, unless, according to the Securities Act of 1933, unless they have filed with the Securities Exchange Commission a registration statement which contains a prospectus, which contains all material information about the company or the endeavor, unless they file that, and unless the SEC declares such registration statement effective, your security issuances are illegal. Now, you can have an exemption from registration if you only sell to selected types of investors, or you sell offshore to non-U.S. persons, because the U.S. securities laws don't try to pretend that they can extend to protecting citizens worldwide. So companies that are properly advised by lawyers are well aware of the U.S. securities laws. So if you're going to issue a security, you're a company and you want to raise some capital, you've got a couple of options. You can try to do a global offering and follow the securities laws of every jurisdiction. Or you can say, I think the United States is the best place to raise capital, so I'm going to try to go public and file a registration statement and put together all the material information that's necessary and be in compliance with U.S. securities rules. Now, sometimes you may wish to do that, but remember, going public it's a pretty arduous task because you have to have a backer, you have to have usually a banker that's going to take the company public. There's listing fees, there's registration fees, there's back and forth between the SEC, you have accountant fees, lawyer fees. It's a pretty expensive endeavor to go public. Well, when the crypto guys got involved with these tokens, they said, hey, we don't need to do any of that. We'll just issue our tokens. We won't go through all this. Who needs bankers? Who needs middlemen? Who needs regulation? So they just started issuing tokens without the type of rigorous and arduously collected information that's required in the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission registration process. So they just issued the tokens on a white paper. Yeah, this is going to do this, and it's great, and it's going to moon, and why don't you get involved? You just send us Ethereum, and you'll get your tokens, and then we'll airdrop them, and all this kind of pretty be-connect type of promotion. Definitely not done in many instances by the book. Now, whether you're in favor of that or not in favor of that, that is the law in the United States. The Securities Act of 1933 was passed by Congress in 1933. The Securities Exchange Act of 1934 was passed in 1934. The 40 Act. There are a number of U.S. regulatory acts that cover the issuance of securities. And issuing a token is no different than issuing a security in most instances. And you do a thing called the Howey test. Are you relying on someone or some group of individuals or even a DApp to create a return on the money that you put in? You're not going to do anything, and you hope that as a result of that enterprise, they're going to do something, or it's going to do something that's going to cause the value of your security, your token, to rise. And if it is, well, that's a security. And if it's a security, it's got to be registered. Now, if you have unregistered securities, if you're selling them, you can get in trouble for selling unregistered securities. So you don't want to be an exchange having unregistered securities on your platform. Or at least you don't want to sell them to U.S. citizens. So that's what Binance is doing. However, it gets a little confusing. We'll break it down. Securities, as we mentioned, are considered investments. They're not considered currencies. They're not considered commodities. So, for example, easy one to understand, gold, silver, oil. They are not typical investments in the sense that you expect the gold corporation, the silver corporation, or the oil corporation to do anything. They are standalone commodities. Gold is gold, silver is silver, oil is oil. Well, they've ruled for legal purposes that Bitcoin is not a security. There is no Bitcoin company that is driving what's going to happen to Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't pay dividends. Bitcoin just is. Whether you like it or not, it's in that sense, it's very similar to gold in that it doesn't require anyone to do anything, or at least no one specifically. Now, the difference between gold and silver and oil is that Bitcoin, in order for it to work, does have to have that infrastructure. You have to have the miners, you have to have the exchanges, but still, the Bitcoin in and of itself, even though technically you can't ring fence it from the system, is in and of itself doesn't require any group of people that are specifically working to improve your investment. So, Bitcoin is not considered a security. Well, if it's not considered security, guess what? The rules of the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, do not apply. You don't have to file a registration statement. You don't have to find an exemption to filing a registration statement, which could be you sell offshore or you sell just to qualified institutional investors. So Bitcoin, the SEC has ruled, they say it's not a security. Ethereum, same thing. Litecoin, same thing. They are not deemed to be securities. So why doesn't Binance just sell or have on its platform Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum? Well, I think that's what's going to happen. Binance is going to block, in other words, their platform has everything on it. It doesn't just have Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum. It's got all the BS tokens, all the ones that probably should have been registered that aren't, but they're trading. And outside the U.S., maybe there's not a rule that requires them to be registered or anything. They're just listed on Binance platform. Well, U.S. securities laws say, look, if you're going to open up your investments to Americans, you have to be dealing with an exemption if you're going to sell stuff to U.S. citizens, or you got to have registered securities. So when you buy Apple shares on a stock exchange in the United States, you're an American, you're presumably covered, not presumably, but when I say presumably, I mean just because a company's filed a registration statement and puts everything in there that the SEC requires of them, doesn't mean that they haven't committed fraud. It just means they've signed off that they haven't committed fraud on the document they submitted. So when you buy Apple shares, those are registered shares. Apple didn't just issue shares and say, hey, we got this thing, it's called an iPhone, a lot of people like it, some people don't, but we're going to sell a lot of them. Now they got to do a lot more. They have to explain a lot more about what the iPhone is, how much revenue they make, what the risk factors are. These documents, these 10Ks, the annual report. All right, I hope we're back. All right, last try. If not, I'm going to call it a night. This is a cutoff all the time when we talk here. When you buy Apple shares, as I mentioned, you are buying a registered security. Now, what is Binance going to do about this? Well, what they're going to do is they're going to block U.S. citizens from accessing their site. Now, apparently, a lot of Americans somehow managed to open up Binance accounts. They trade there. They're going to allow withdrawals, according to what the company says. So people will pull their Bitcoin, all their tokens out. Many of them may want to sell them because if they bring them back, they won't be able to sell them probably on U.S. exchanges if they have some of these tokens that are unregistered. But if they have Bitcoin or Litecoin, they can probably just move them back to another exchange and hold them there or sell them, whatever they're going to do. But Binance understands that they're going to probably not want to forego the U.S. market. So rather than have the U.S. market eligible to trade or have access to all of those different tokens that are probably not properly registered in the United States, they're going to open up, it looks like Binance America. Binance USA, let me see exactly what they're calling it. I think it's Binance America. They announced that today. And what that'll do is they will create a fully compliant with the regulations in the U.S. Yeah, Binance US, it's called, will provide secure and reliable cryptocurrency trading to users in the United States. Now, I would imagine that those cryptocurrencies will be exactly that. They won't have tokens. They will have a more limited set of cryptocurrencies that the SEC does not have jurisdiction over. Now, that doesn't mean that Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, because they're not securities, that they don't have regulatory oversight. In other words, tokens, well, they're going to have to go through this extensive rigmarole with the SEC or they won't be able to raise capital. No, that's true, but it doesn't mean that Bitcoin and Litecoin and Ethereum are not regulated. In the U.S. regulatory structure, they have been deemed commodities, and that's why you see Bitcoin futures run by the CME group. They're the same group that runs the oil. No, they don't run the oil one. They run the gold and silver futures exchange. They're commodities. The CME group is regulated by the CFTC, the Commodities Futures Trading Commission. So they are the ones that regulate this, and so there is no issue with trading cryptocurrencies, the same type of registration issue you have with the SEC. So they're not securities. And so what I would imagine Binance is going to do is allow Americans to trade cryptocurrencies. And we saw this also with, I think it was Kraken. Kraken had to, what they did instead of banning U.S. citizens, they had to delete a number of tokens from their platform. They did the reverse. Rather than banning the Americans, they banned the tokens. Now, Binance probably didn't want to do that because I believe only 15% of their customer base comes from the U.S. So banning those tokens would mean 85% of their other customers wouldn't have access to them. That would be unwieldy. I believe Kraken is probably more U.S. Canadian centric, and therefore they decided rather than banning Americans, because that would probably be 80-90% of their customers. I don't know, but I assume they're more U.S. Canadian centric, that they decided to ban the tokens or remove the tokens from their platform. So that's what's going to happen. I don't think it's a big deal. They put out a coming soon. They've announced today a partnership with BAM Trading Services to begin preparation to launch trading services for users in the United States. Binance will license its cutting-edge matching engine and wallet technologies to its U.S. partner BAM to launch Binance US. And it is acknowledged by its recently approved FinCEN registration on June 11, 2019. So they're ready to go with probably a more abbreviated platform, but probably it's going to be no different than Coinbase, because I would imagine Coinbase only has things on their site that meet the requirements of the SEC, or otherwise they don't need to meet the requirements because they're cryptocurrencies. Now, you don't see that many tokens on Coinbase for that reason. All right, let's get into some of the other crypto news. Let's take a look at the prices. Let's see what we got. So, Bitcoin was the big winner today. Bitcoin had been lagging for the last month or so. It was Litecoin that was racing up the charts. Litecoin got fired all the way up to 141. In recent days, it's fallen back. It fell back to about 126. Right now, it's at 131, so it's still in a very strong position. But that's pretty much flat on the day. It is Bitcoin that's the big winner today. Bitcoin at 8,656. That's up nearly 5%. Ethereum at 263.94. That's up over 3%.